Okay, so I'm just going to get started while other people, join us. And I'm going to get started by telling you about Madiba Foundation for Good Governance, which is the organization that is hosting this webinar series. So Madiba Foundation is a Pan-African non-governmental organization, and we seek to promote equality in the process of development for the African race and other excluded groups. And a bit about our mission and our vision. So our vision is a continent that Africans everywhere in the world can be justly proud of. So our mission as well is to deploy Africa's best vision, skills, and energies to promote democratic ideals that advance inclusive and sustainable development across the continent. And for the theme, how we came about, the theme Citizens at the Heart of Nation Building, it's closely tied and related to what we do at Madiba Foundation. And the theme essentially is a webinar series that seeks to mobilize Nigerians, especially young people, to actively participate in the process of nation building by instilling a deeper understanding of their role as citizens. So in order to be a better citizen, you must understand your role as citizens. And the goal of the webinar series is to stir the hearts of citizens, emphasizing the importance of personal and collective responsibility in shaping Nigeria's future. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, these are maybe 3 key points that we focus on, which is to increase the awareness and have a greater sense of our responsibility towards our role in national development, as well as committing to the values being promoted, values like integrity, accountability, honesty, and being law-abiding. We, want to mobilize for change. And essentially, we know that it's a seemingly small drop in an ocean, but there are so many more people out there with the same ideals and values as we have. And we need to keep coming together as a collective to make our voices louder and to amplify and positively influence those around us, especially the next generation. And to start off this webinar series, I want to introduce us to our speakers. I'm starting with Dr. Chido Onumah, who is with us. I want us to just, give a warm welcome in the chat box as well, as I am reading out his bio. I'll be very brief. So Dr. Chido Onumah, sorry, I'm not seeing in the chat box where we are welcoming our guest speakers. So please let us ensure to do that. Dr. Chido Onumah is a journalist, a media trainer, and a rights activist. He has worked as a journalist in Nigeria, Ghana, Canada, India, and Spain. He has been involved for more than 3 decades in media training for professional journalists, human rights advocacy, as well as promoting media and information literacy in Africa. So he's currently the coordinator of the African Center for Media and Information Literacy in Abuja, Nigeria, and he's also the chair of the board of Whistleblowing International Network. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Leonard Ugbajah. Mr. Ugbajah is a legal professional, international development consultant, and policy advisor with nearly 2 decades of experience. He specializes in competition and consumer protection law, trade and regional integration, business environment reforms, and renewable energy projects. Mr. Ugbajah is the founder and executive director of the Center for Trade and Business Environment Advocacy in Abuja, and he's also the principal consultant at TBE Advisory Limited. Let's just put our hands together for our guest speakers. Thank you, Simon. I see the hands. I see the warm welcome. And as you can see, we have such interesting speakers lined up today. And I just want to formally welcome you, Dr. Onumah and Mr. Ugbajah.
Thank you very much, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's so good to have you here. Yes, I see Mr. Ugbajah now.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yes, sir. So what we want to do is, get right on it. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I can see. Yes, awesome. So I want to start, with what has brought us to this webinar series. I'm going to start with Dr. Onumah. If you could shed some light on what integrity means in both public and private life. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much again, Jessica. And I'd like to congratulate you and the Madiba Foundation for the great strides you've been making, and also for putting this together. I know it's been quite hectic. I had to run from another event. I think I spotted your executive director at that same event, and it was dragging on. And I was begging them to end the program so I could rush back and get ready for this. These are the kind of conversation, and interestingly, we've been having a lot of this conversation, talking about the program I attended, which was something to do with the state of anti-corruption policy and practice in Nigeria. I met Dr. Professor Adele Jinadu, one of the preeminent political scientists in not just in Nigeria, but on the continent of Africa, and indeed globally, who was the keynote speaker. And we were discussing before the event started. We made reference to about a week ago, I was also on another panel at the same venue where we were discussing deepening democracy in Nigeria at the 70th birthday lecture of another great political scientist, Professor Jibril Ibrahim, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development. And the conversation I had with Professor Jinadu this morning was the need, the need for us to continue this kind of conversation. There is a sense in which I believe, and I stand to be corrected, that we haven't had enough conversation about Nigeria, about public life, about citizenship, about nationhood. And Professor Jinadu reminded me that it's not just about having conversation, having the right kind of conversation, having the right kind of people have this conversation. So it's in that context that I speak to the topic today and how excited I am about being part of this process. When I was asked to do this, I didn't hesitate. I just told the person that contacted me that I had another program. I hope I'll be able to finish on time to join this. Back to the question you asked, integrity in public and private life. Citizens are the heart of nation building. In trying to address this topic, there are three issues at stake. So you look at the question of citizenship, who is a citizen? And interestingly, that was also one of the questions that came up at the conversation we had both last Monday and earlier today. Then we look at the question of nation. Citizens are the heart of the nation. When is a nation? What's a nation? And then nation building. What does nation building entails? What does it mean? Does it mean different things to different people? So in trying to understand the topic, it's critically important that we break down these three elements, and we can go deeper into this when we as we proceed with the program. But just in terms of, by way of preliminary remarks, I would like to simply address your question. And this is something we used to do when I was at the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission many years ago. I led the crime prevention unit, and part of my agenda was to devise an anti-corruption strategy, a public or citizens-led anti-corruption mechanism for the country. And one of the most important quotes for me then, and it still is now, which I used to share, and every opportunity I had then I would, push it out, was a quote by a former US Senator, Alan Simpson, and it speaks to the topic that we're addressing today. It says, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. It's so deep, it's so fundamental. You really need to deconstruct it. On the surface, it looks so easy and it can well be confusing. But when you dig deeper, it says, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. So on one hand, integrity is at the heart of the survival of whether it's a family, an organization, an institution, and therefore a nation. On the other hand, lack of integrity can also be the demise or the end of a family, an institution, and therefore a nation. And then digging deeper, you say, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. You abide by the laws, you play by the rules, you ensure probity and accountability. If you don't have integrity, nothing else is important to you. You stand, anywhere you find yourself, you're interested, all you're interested in doing is to break the law, to stand the rule on its head, to pervert, to ensure to promoting justice and all of that, lack of probity, lack of accountability. So I think it's important that, and there are many dimensions of this conversation or the topic, word integrity. A lot of people will, in a society like ours, they would rather say, oh, it's relative. What is, just like the term, one man's freedom fighter, it's another person's terrorist. One person's terrorist, another person's freedom fighter. People can also tell you that the whole question or notion of integrity is a relative term. It depends on the circumstance, it depends on the material condition, and so on. And there is this quote that is attributed to Fidel Castro, the late revolutionary leader of the Cuban nation, which says that in a lawless society, it's illegal to be lawful. So if you have a lawless society, it's illegal to be lawful. Nobody. So if you have a society, and again, there is this interconnectedness in what I was talking about, citizenship, nationhood, and nation building. So if you have a country where integrity means nothing, then, or a country where to have integrity is the, or rather not to have integrity is the rule rather than the exception, then those who don't have integrity will feel that they are not doing anything bad, we are in a nation of men and women without integrity, and therefore we have to behave the same way. So I think as we continue the conversation, hopefully we'll dig deeper into either why people think this way, why these things happen, and how as citizens, as a collective, as a nation, we can come together and agree. And you reference this in terms of common values and ethics, what constitutes integrity, whether between some people won't mind, or maybe, and again, going back to the conversation we had earlier this morning at the program I just attended, and a young student, a female student in one of the secondary schools that came, was okay, what do I do if my parents want to register me for a special school because of my WAEC exam? Do I defy my parents where religious and moral and traditional ethics demand that you obey your parents, you don't talk back to your parents, you are under the age of 18, you are therefore assumed to be a minor, you are under the care of your parents, and so on. So I think as a people, we need to have a common ground and common understanding of what should be those norms and ethics or moral standards and so on that should guide us. And then that would help us define how we should relate to one another, should relate to the society in general. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Onumah. You can see why I was quickly trying to get through the bios, because there's so much for us to actually get to know as we carry on. And in that light, I want to also just give the same question to Mr. Ugbajah. I would like for him to also just shed light on his own perspective of what integrity means in both public and private life. Thank you. And you're welcome again, sir.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Dr. Onumah, for that enlightening perspective. Now, if you just take a look at, if you take a dictionary approach, a lexical approach to the definition, you see that integrity is associated with such terms as honesty, doing the right thing, uncompromising, moral values. Those are some of the words associated with integrity. And so you could just say integrity is personal. It is primarily a personal attribute. It's primarily a person's worldview, what you or how you choose to live your life. Now, it's the same integrity that you need in the private life that you need in the public life, as a matter of fact. There's really no dichotomy. If you have it in your private life, then it carries over to your public life. If you don't have it in your private life, then you don't have it in the public life. So if you want to like Doc said about integrity and about the state and the society that lacks integrity, it seems those who then have integrity are the endangered species. That's the way I like to describe it. And what you see is that for a society to have integrity, put it that way, means that a critical mass of individuals in that society have integrity. Now, a society that lacks integrity means that that critical mass is missing. There's no other place to manufacture it from. It's from the individuals in that society. So I'll just say that integrity is about being true to yourself, having strong moral values about what is right and what is wrong, being honest, being consistent. So for example, if I had an appointment at 3 o'clock and at 3:15 you called me and I said, oh, I'm on my way, or I'm almost there, while I'm still in my house, that's a clear way to say there's no integrity. It's not up in the air, it's not abstract, it's not high sounding, it's in the everyday things, it's in the normal activities of our day, it's in our effort to cut corners, to get ahead of the next person, irrespective of the rules of the game. Is in our effort to gain what we have not merited, whether it is in an examination situation, whether it is in a business situation, in a work situation, to take something that you haven't merited, by the rules. Those are the places where integrity comes to play. And for someone who has lived their lives in cutting corners, lived their lives in beating the system and beating the rules, then when the person comes to public position, the person is just a disaster waiting to happen. It's just as simple as that. It's not far-fetched. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Ugbajah. And I really love how both of our speakers have highlighted what integrity, looks like, and how without it, or even when you have it, it's almost like you are the anomaly, when it's so prevalent that people move without integrity. And I love how Mr. Ugbajah put it, that if you don't have it in your personal life, there's no way you can implement it or apply it in the public life. And also, like Dr. Onumah has said, it's conversations like this that cause us to stop and think, and just sort of introspect and say, okay, do I actually possess this quality, and how can I do better? So thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the next question, and I want Mr. Ugbajah to just shed light on how government and organizations design and implement, policies or legislation that effectively foster integrity and accountability. What is the role of our governments, and how can also organizations, design and implement policies or legislations that effectively foster integrity and accountability? Yes, thank you. So you're muted.
Okay, I say thank you. That's quite an interesting question, and I'm just, thinking about it. So now we see government having a leadership position. That's basically what the government does. So, and as one of our musicians will say, if you be leader, lead us well. So how well does the government lead in structuring the society along certain moral compass? I think that's the question. And let me reduce it to even a smaller unit, or rather the smaller social unit, to the family unit. Now, how a leader, maybe mother, father, whoever in the family, how do you set the moral compass of your family? The most important element is not the laws or the policies or the institutions that you set up. I think the most important element is what I would call the power of personal example. So if a leader, whether in the family, in the community, or wherever it is, lives above board, and everybody around you knows that you are above board, I think you've done like 70% of the work. The policies, the laws, the institutions would be there just to clarify, to guide, for the avoidance of doubt. What are, you're kind of setting a code of conduct for the avoidance of doubt, just to make sure that anyone who looks would be able to see what the rules, the guidelines are, to follow them. But they are not primarily. Now I go back to Dr. Onumah's quote. If you have integrity, you have everything, and if you don't have integrity, you have nothing. So when you have integrity, when the leader leads right, the rules will just be like an addition. They are not the driving force of the life of the society, but they are just a statement of the values of the society, which the people have already imbibed. So coming to government and people in government, the number one expectation is that he who leads must lead with integrity. Whether it is shunning corruption, whether it is shunning nepotism, sectarianism, you have your moral compass firmly and rightly set in the right direction. Then that gives you the moral legitimacy to make rules for people to obey. And I'll contrast this with what we have in Nigeria at the moment. Unfortunately, I'll use Nigeria as an example here. I mean, we are predominantly Nigerians here, that we have multiple institutions. We have laws at different levels, but why are we still deeply enmeshed in corruption? So the solution is not in the laws. In fact, in most cases, I mean, I've practiced law in Nigeria. I've done business in Nigeria. I've been in government, in and out of government in Nigeria, at the state level, at the national level in Nigeria, and I can tell you, you know, that sometimes the rules themselves, those institutions themselves that have been established to ensure integrity in public life end up being the enablers of corruption. Why? Because the human beings who operate those systems, the human beings who operate those rules themselves don't have integrity. That's why in Nigeria, for example, an anti-corruption officer, whether it's EFCC or whatever, can advise someone who is being indicted for corruption or who is under investigation on the best ways to get off the hook. It's routine. And that's why in Nigeria, a legal officer in the Ministry of Justice, can connive with someone who is under prosecution to get the person off the hook. In most cases, it's not even the judge. The case is already spoiled before it gets to the judge, so that the judge, doesn't have an option but just to follow what has been presented before him or her. So what do we do? The solution for me is that we need to be more circumspect about our leadership recruitment process. I don't like pontificating or being whatever about this, but permit me to say this, since you brought me on this platform. Really, these are issues I rarely talk about these days. I just want to mind my business. I think we are at a point where probably 95% of the people in public life in Nigeria don't have any business handling public trust. They don't have any business coming close public trust. Because the fundamentals of who qualifies to handle public, I see it as sacred. It is a sacred mandate, it's a sacred calling that the resources of the public, the morality of the public is entrusted into the hands of someone. That means at that point, you're expected to put your own personal interest, your own personal needs, sectarian interest, and preferences at the background. Just like a true father would do in a family, because you want to work for the improvement of the society. But we don't have that. So we need to be more circumspect about the people we entrust public office to. I know, yeah, it gets to politics, as Americans will say, it's the economy stupid. Here I will say it's the politics stupid. Our leadership recruitment process, until we fix that aspect, where we will be able to project and select or elect the right kind of persons into government, then we will not solve the issue of corruption in public life. We just keep going around the circles. It's the human beings. It's not the rules. It's not the institutions. It's the human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ugbajah. That's an interesting take on the question. And like you said, we have to be more circumspect about the people that we, put into office. And I know that most youth now, if you ask them about voting and all of that, they would say that, oh, my vote doesn't count. And that's one of the reasons why we did the I Pledge to Vote campaign at Madiba Foundation. I think it was 2022, yes, because your vote actually does count. And these are the ways that we can ensure that we see the Nigeria that we want to, live in. And I just want to throw the same question to Dr. Onumah, if you can just shed more light in how you think the government, the people who are supposed to be leading by example, how they can also, make it that we are actually living in a nation that is of integrity.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the challenge here, and my co-panelist, Mr. Ugbajah, has really done justice in terms of answering the question. I was going to talk about our politics. We need to get our politics right to get every other thing right. But again, just to stretch the conversation, and I may sound like a broken record now because everywhere I find myself, and blame me not, it's the product of many years of research, writing, and all of that. So if we raise questions about integrity and we talk about the leadership recruitment process or getting our politics right, there is also an extension of that. There is a sense in which our bad politics is a reflection of the bad structure of the country. So fundamentally, there are a lot of things wrong with the structure and basis of the Nigerian nation. So if that structure is bad, so it's like a building. If the foundation is faulty, the politics, you can describe the politics as the building blocks, the walls and the windows, and then maybe the furniture as the people who inhabit that nation. So if the walls are not strong enough, the windows are not good enough, the furniture sooner or later will go bad, either from weather or some other conditions. But that's at one level. The most fundamental thing would, of course, be you can't even be talking about the furniture and the window and doors and the building blocks when the foundation itself is faulty. So if you need to maybe use 1,000 bags of cement to put up a foundation and you used just 100, it means whatever it is you're building, ultimately that foundation, that building will sooner or later collapse or give way. So for me, that's the way I see the crisis of integrity in Nigeria. And it's not as if Nigerians are among the worst people you can find anywhere in the world. I've lived outside this country for almost 30 years and more recently been back and forth. And I've lived in different countries, both in terms of education and work around the world in different continents. And, you know, it's the same human factor, the same. So Nigerians, and I was going to mention the question of, say, running street lights here. I don't do a lot of driving in Nigeria, and a lot of my friends tease me about that because I'm used to, in the last 30 years or so, I'm used to driving and you drive on roads. So for example, in Abuja, the city capital, or rather the country's capital, you see well-paved roads, expressway more or less, driving from the city center to the airport, 4-6 lane ways. They are not marked. Cars are, and I'm just beside myself and wondering, how do you drive anywhere without, so when you mark the road, everybody knows that they have to be on their lane. There are some countries in other parts of the world where if you are on the left lane or you accidentally find yourself on the left lane, you can't cross a yellow line. If you do, you can only overtake a vehicle or cross if you have dotted lines. If the line is thick yellow, it means you are not permitted to move from one lane to another. If by accident you find yourself on a right lane, you can only turn left. You can't make it. You have to turn right and look for another intersection to go and then find your bearing. But here, you find a 6 or 8 lane road, and somebody is moving from lane 1 to lane 8 at the same time, zigzagging, and everybody. So it goes back to the question I raised, or the issue I raised at the beginning. When you live in a society, in a lawless society, if you live in a lawless society, then what does it mean being law-abiding and wanting to respect the rule? I think the state has a lot to do, and we as citizens, of course, have a lot to do in terms of organizing our society the way we want it to be. And there have been efforts at that. So I know what I went through getting a driver's license outside Nigeria. First, I had to go to a driving school for 1 year. I got my certificate. And then with that certificate, I went to the department of government that was responsible. And so the driving agency, they have regulations. You have to take these classes. Here, people manufacture certificates from driving school without learning anything about driving. And then they get a license, and then they get to the road and cause all kinds of mayhem. So how do we ensure, whether we're parents or caregivers, ensure that, look, if, for example, a child who turns 18 has to go through the process of driving, or even something as simple as birth certificates. People are faking their birth certificates because they want to start school early. So you are a parent, you have a 2 or 3 year old who is not up to school age, either because you want to get them out of the house or you just want them to start school so that by 14 or 15 years old, you can beat your chest and dance, roll out the drum that my son or daughter has graduated at the age of 12 from secondary school and is in university. And then you go to other more organized society, which is really the difference between our society and the rest, whether you're looking at the United Kingdom, Canada, or most parts of Europe or the United States. And I can speak to this because I have lived and worked in these places. In Canada and the United States, and I was having this conversation with some family members on Sunday. I say, unless you are 6 years old, you can't start kindergarten. My children, I've had the experience with my 4 kids. Unless you are 6 years old. So school starts on the day after Labor Day, which is the first Monday of September of every year. So if Monday, the first Monday of this year, September, is the 4th, it means the new school season will start on the 5th of September. If you are born on the 6th of September, so if you turn 6 years old, first of all, nobody will register you unless you are 6 years old. And the first thing you need to present for school registration is your birth certificate, which you can't falsify because the moment you are born, your details go into the national system, the national database. So if school starts on the 5th, no, I beg, oh, consider me, or you want to brag. If school starts on the 5th of September of that year that you turn 6, and you were born on the 6th, 24 hours later, you were born on the 6th of September. So school starts today for every student going into grade 1. And tomorrow you'll be 6 years old. It means you are old enough. Nobody will register you. You have to wait till the following September. So it means by the time you are registering for school, you are not qualified by law to start school. You can't beg your way out of it. You can't bribe. And I say this because I've seen it, I've experienced it. You can't bribe your way out of the system. So there is a lot we need to put together in, getting this wholesome society we're looking on. We can't have a situation where one sector works and the other. The issue of birth registration, for example, is something that is close to my heart, that there is a reason for every Nigerian, no matter where you find yourself, even if it's the remotest part of the country, that everybody, once you have a baby, that baby is registered. I worked as a consultant for UNICEF for many years, and we toured many parts of it. I saw a situation where kids who were 12 years old, for example, because they had stunted growth, they were looking like 6 or 7 year olds, and there was no birth record, and they were being treated with the same medication that you treat a 6 or 7 year old, and it was having no effect on them. So you see the impact that something as simple, or people think as simple as birth registration, will have on the education, on the health, well-being, and so many, so many factors. And so I think it's important. Yes, we can look at governments, of course, set up institutions, and there are so many institutions. We have the policies and laws in the main, but many times the political will to ensure that. But again, importantly, as Mr. Ugbajah mentioned, there is also the need for leaders to lead by example.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes it's easier to lead than to make laws. Or so if, for example, I go back to what happened during the President Goodluck Jonathan era, for example, they were fighting corruption, and there was the Goodluck graciously signed the Freedom of Information Bill. My organization, the African Center for Media and Information Literacy, was the first organization that requested the asset declaration of the president. And then we wrote to the code of conduct. They didn't even dignify us with a response. They just ignored us. We went to court, and the court ruled. I think the matter is even still in court. It may soon be coming up in the Supreme Court, and that's since 2015. No, 2011, beg your pardon. It's been that long. Say, okay, if you want to fight corruption, you're talking about accountability. You are the president of the country. You ought to lead by example. There is a reason why you are the commander-in-chief. You are the reason why you are, like, the whole country revolves around you. You are in charge of everything. What you say, it's law. So what better way to lead than to lead by example and say, we can't, and that was the reason we embarked on that process. We say, if the president can come out and declare his asset publicly, there'll be no reason for any minister or even governor, even though the president doesn't have powers over the governor because we live in a federation. The states are to a great extent independent, and the role of the governor is respected in the constitution. But if the president of the federation comes out to declare his asset publicly, no public officer that works under the president or at the pleasure of the president would say he or she would not declare the asset. But it didn't happen. And then the ministers they just started quoting the same message that we are not under any obligation that we will declare our asset, but we are not under any obligation to make our asset public. So I think we really have to, and the conversation needs to get deeper in terms of us as a people defining what kind of society we want. It's that definition, that acceptance, and it goes back to simple issues, as I mentioned, in terms of school. Imagine the uproar about being 18 and registering in university. Even though it wasn't well planned, I mean, the mistake has already been made. So if you want to say it's something, you then, because there are kids who, for no fault of theirs, they've been rushed through primary and secondary school. They are now 15. And if you say, they can't get to university until they are 18, it means for 3 years, they'll be sitting at home doing nothing. For the energetic ones, they can decide to do all kinds of things, including Yahoo and all of that. So you have an education policy talking about every society, every country defining what is priority for it. You say you have a society in a country where people graduate from university for 10 years, they don't have job. What's the essence of rushing kids? We don't allow kids to be kids. You see a 3-year-old is saying, a 4-year-old, I see some kids tiny, you ask them, they are in SS1, SS2, how old are you? I'm 11 years old, I'm 12 years old. So you go to some organized society, which is the difference between ours and the so-called developed society, is that organization. Every kid in Canada and the United States, as I speak, who is 18 years old, if you see any kid who is in grade 12, you know that they are 18 years old. Every kid in grade 12. The only difference will be those born after September. So they'll be 18 plus or heading to 19. That's all. It helps in planning, it helps in all kinds of things. So maybe we need to get back to that national conversation and then perhaps help ourselves to define how we want to live and be as a people.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Onumah. That is very wholesome. And it actually, has me thinking about so many things as well, because like the example you cited in terms of the children that had the stunted growth that were 12, we don't know how the impact of just doing certain things and just like there's no the structure around it. It's almost like the individuals don't see the necessity or the need for it. They don't understand that it's that important, so it's just about themselves getting ahead. Same with the parent, the example that you cited with the parents just wanting to send their children to school, or maybe just saying that, oh yes, my child has finished school at a certain age. We need to understand why these things are important, because we have to have like a unified voice, unified value, and that way it reduces the selfishness, because that's what I see here. It's a selfish mentality where you're not thinking of the benefits of the next person, and
That's it.
I'm so grateful for all of the points that you have highlighted. And just to go back to what you shared, Mr. Ugbajah, in terms of how our leaders must lead by example, what is the role for us as citizens now? And I know I just mentioned an aspect to it, but if you can just go further, to say that this is the role as citizens, what we should do. We shouldn't be waiting for our leaders, in quotes, to do the right thing before we then do the right thing, because if we do that, I feel like we'll be having these conversations over and over, and we wouldn't see any headway in terms of where we want to see the nation. So you're muted.
Yeah, the thing about citizens and leaders is not complicated. Our leaders are taken from among us. They are not different from us. If you have a society that has predominantly people of integrity, their leadership will be predominantly people of integrity. So, yeah, in as much as we place emphasis on what leadership could do, it is not lost on anyone that someone will say, or some people usually say that the average Nigerian is an oppressor in the waiting. We are mostly, or will be made. Let me not say we are. Let me say we'll be made mostly people who are just waiting for their turn. We're not really mad about corruption. We're not mad about oppression. We are just mad that we are not the ones enjoying the fruit of the corruption or the fruit of being the oppressors by ourselves. And I think that's where the soul searching needs to be. I've also had my days in the NGO world in Nigeria. I've seen the underbelly of activists, who champion anti-corruption, who champion integrity as a matter of advocacy. But then if you see the way their own systems are run and all that, you will shudder, So it's about us as a people. It's about what our society has been made into. I'll probably say it's a broken system. That brokenness can be traced to colonial history. When people are detached from their roots and from the cultural foundations and the morals that get them grounded and give them a worldview and an outlook towards life, then they are bound to be lost. I think that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem for us. And you can trace this theme from the works of Chinua Achebe, from Things Fall Apart and the sequel, Man of the People, and that you see it was gradual deterioration that happens in the society that then affects the psyche of the people, and you cast, permit me to use the biblical expression. I think it's King James or whichever Bible, which translation talks about casting off restraint. So the way it happens is the citizen looks at the system and asks himself, what is in this system for me? And you really cannot see yourself as a stakeholder in that system. And when you can't see yourself having a stake in that system, you don't really get benefits out of that system. The system expects you to keep sacrificing and pouring out your blood with little or no benefit. Then you simply tell yourself, well, if I don't have a stake in this system, why should I then bother to sacrifice my comfort? Why should I then pursue integrity? Why should I then care about the system? So for you to talk about citizens who are sacrificial, who choose to maintain a lifestyle of integrity in spite of what the system says or shows, you're looking at citizens who have some form of hope. I'll put it that way. They will need something to anchor their hope on. So it's like this. So in a traditional society, everybody has a sense of communalism. It's a collective. So we are working to make our lives better as a unit, as a community. We're working to make our lives better. Everybody knows everyone, and everybody has a sense of belonging where you think it's your responsibility to contribute to making this community better. Now, if there are dislocations, a few miscreants, a few outliers who want to upturn the table, and make the life of the community unbearable, everybody comes together to deal with those. It doesn't really matter whether it's your brother, whether it's your sister, but that person is viewed as a threat to the collective. So we deal with the person as such. It could be punitive, it could be restorative, but there's some kind of justice is meted out in that setting. Now, and again, interestingly, this would also take us to the point of our political structure. Now, when you have a structure that has divorced people from their roots, that have divorced people from that sense of the collective, of communalism, of the common good, and thrown them into a system of society that doesn't hold any hope or any value or any aspiration. They don't see a stake they hold in that society. Now, they tend to just take what they get, what they can get, and can what they get and sit on the can. So you simply want to make your life comfortable in the midst of the chaos that is around you. So for citizens, what I would say is, when I talk and I say, and I'm incurable optimist in the future greatness or the greatness of Nigeria. I have a friend a few weeks ago. We were chatting on a platform, and he said, "Good luck to you. For me, I don't want to have anything to do with Nigeria. I've given up." And many Nigerians in diaspora actually have given up, on the entity called. In fact, many Nigerians in Nigeria have given up on the entity called, Nigeria. Now, but we need to find a way of instilling hope in the citizens. I think that's the challenge. We need to find a way of telling the citizens that, see, we can build a better nation out of what we have, and for us to build a better nation out of what we have, you must be able to contribute your quota. You must be able to do your bit. And what does it mean doing my bit? What it means doing my bit is that if I'm a private citizen, I want to be law-abiding. Like Dr. Onumah talked about the traffic in management in Abuja. And I usually tell people that the day I would decide to leave Nigeria, I mean, I'm in and out at the moment, but before I even stepped out at some point, I used to say that the day I decide eventually that I'm fed up, that top on the list will probably be the traffic management and all that. Just a simple thing about you can't drive to the rules and get to your destination safely. If you try that, you'll be the endangered person. So you have to become mad in a way to be able to adjust to the madness of the environment, and I don't know how to make myself mad to adjust to the madness of the environment. It's very difficult for me. So I'll end up looking stupid. I'll end up being endangered just because I want to do the right thing. So, so it comes to us telling citizens that there's hope. We can make this a better nation. And for us to make this a better nation, you have a role to play. So how do we sell that element of hope to our citizens? How do we sell that vision of a greater Nigeria, of a better Nigeria, of a Nigeria that values, that places the citizens at the heart of nation building, like your theme has said? Citizens don't just walk themselves into the heart of nation building. It's the system, it's the leadership, it's the nation that deliberately prioritizes and places the citizens at the heart of nation building. When the citizens then feel that they are stakeholders within that system, how do we sell that hope? Now, because if you succeed in transmitting that hope of a better Nigeria to the citizens, now you get a response. The response you will get is that, it is my responsibility, it is your responsibility. You create a sense of collective responsibility. And once you do that, then you're able to tell people, so for us to get from this point where we are to where we need to get to, you have to behave this way, behave that way, don't do this, then they can listen. Why? Because they have a reason, they have a hope, they have an expectation that if I do right, not just that my life is going to be better as a person, but I'll live in a saner society. But where there is no overarching vision or hope you're selling to the citizens, I don't doubt that there are people who, based on their own strong moral convictions, will decide to do the right thing, no matter what, And I also know, unfortunately, that many of those people get to a breaking point and they decide to check out, And I wouldn't say whether I'm one of those who have gotten to that point and decided to check out, but, I know quite a few persons who have gotten to that point where they just see that this system, for now, we need to give some space and find our own sanity elsewhere, and then probably try to see how we can come back to see what we can do about the system. It can be frustrating, when you become the mad person, when your sanity is interpreted as madness, and madness is the norm. But for me, I always send out that message of hope to anyone who cares to listen, that, if we collectively, do our bit, it doesn't have to be too many people. I've come across, Nigerians who are diehard optimists and who believe that whatever it will take at the level of personal sacrifice, to say no to certain things, to walk away from certain things, that they are going to do it because they believe that by so doing, they are laying the foundation, they are laying the pathway to the kind of Nigeria that they want to see. I know quite a lot of them in Nigeria. I know many of them outside Nigeria. And for a citizen who aspires to do this pathway, what I will advise is that you link yourself with people of similar convictions, and walk along with them in this pathway. And I assure you, you can see I'm just an idealist, but truly, I believe that somewhere along the line, something is going to give, and we'll begin to have, a nation that really places people at the heart of nation building. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Ugbajah. That was also very, very insightful. And at a point, you said something about being an incurable optimist. I think that's something we can all just borrow and run with, But yes, the point of seeing we as citizens, as stakeholders you know, in the nation is also very key, because if you don't think that you have something to lose, you will just keep, you know, giving it your, not even putting in the effort to seeing that, you know, the nation can be better. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think that even from the conversation, a conversation like this is one that also just sheds light on how it is possible. You know, sometimes we think that it's such a far-fetched thing, you know, to see a nation that is running well or running smoothly. And like Dr. Onumah had shared concerning the lanes while driving, I think that's an example that anyone can even spot, you know, in Nigeria, in Abuja here, you know, how we drive on the roads. It tells a lot. It tells a lot about our mindset. It tells a lot about us even looking out for the well-being of another person, the next person, because if you beat a traffic stop, a traffic light, and another car is coming with speed, that could be like, you know, an accident, and then it can cause loss of life. It's like you're not thinking about the next person or about how your actions can affect the next person. So yes, I think a take home for all of us is to see ourselves as stakeholders of the country, of any nation that we find ourselves in. I don't know if Dr. Onumah has anything he wants to add to this. And also,
Yeah.
sorry, and also we can just, if you have any questions that you want to drop in the chat box, please go ahead. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so quickly, just to add, I don't know how much time we have. I think at the bottom, and I can't emphasize this enough, of the crisis, or what some people have referred to as the tragedy of the Nigerian situation, is we have a country in which people don't feel they have much stake. People do not feel that they have people do not feel that they have enough interest to be part of the society itself. So it's almost like I remember an article I wrote a while ago, stakeholders without stake. We keep hearing that expression, which is often everybody's a stakeholder, and you keep asking, where is the stake for us to, like, we're stakeholders without stake. So we live in a country where even those who govern the country, those we call our leaders, who either we elected or found their way to leadership position, do not believe in the country itself. So you have a situation where the person who is the Minister of Education, so-called, for example, would have all his or her children schooling outside the country, some of the best universities, when ASU is on strike. I mean, can you beat that contradiction? You have a society where our leaders they go to, we have Obudu Cattle Ranch, we have Sherry Hills in Jos, we have leaders, when they are sick, they make money in Nigeria and go to die in these other countries, and then they are dead. Their corpses are brought back to Nigeria to be buried. So that question of ownership, and most times when I speak, lace my intervention with personal anecdote. So I have a friend, a Ghanaian professor of law who lives in the United Kingdom. Many years ago, I did a whistle stop in London. I just went to see him, and we were talking. Interestingly, it was, I never forget that experience. I think it was a BC or Latin law show, and it was showing on AIT, and we were watching the AIT. It was a period that ASU was on strike. This happened many years ago. Sam Egu was Minister of Education. And on the show, this is a variety show, BC or Latin law show, variety show. So, of course, a lot of adverts and, entertainment. So you had a minister who was celebrating his 50th birthday anniversary when ASU had been on strike for months, Minister of Education, when ASU had been on strike for months. So he was doing a bumper celebration, 50 years of birthday and 25 years of marriage. And then the universities on strike took out adverts in national newspapers full-page adverts in national newspapers to congratulate the minister. Polytechnics took out full-page ads and so on. So we were discussing this, and he now told me a story that many years ago he came to Nigeria. Like most people who live in the northern part of West Africa, he's a Muslim from northern Ghana, and he speaks Hausa very well. So he said he was on this long queue at the airport in Lagos. The heat was unbearable, long queue. He didn't know what to do. So he saw this immigration officer who had a name tag that sounded like his own or something. And then he called up to him and started speaking Hausa to the person. And he said this Nigerian immigration officer picked him from the line and took him to the front of the queue and helped him out personally. So he was telling me that, what kind of country do you have where you respect foreigners more than the citizens of the country? So imagine a foreigner asking me, so we can talk about shared values, shared ethics and beliefs. So you have somebody who, because he speaks the same language as a foreigner, he's attended to. When Nigerians are on the queue, that just tells us the kind of society we operate, how we live here, and why people feel the way they feel. A lot of people feel the way they feel about Nigeria. But having said that, my attitude, maybe it has a lot to do with my own socialization and work and experience and travels and all of that. There is some psychology and sociology to nation building. So I can't say, oh, because I've lived in so place for 30 years, I've had this. No. If you take Canada as an example, Canada has the same shared history. They were colonized by the British, like Nigeria. They also, got independence you had about 3 or 4 provinces that came together to form the Canadian Federation, just like you had the 3 provinces, the eastern or regions, the eastern, western, and northern region at independence. The United States has a history of anti-colonial struggle, colonized by the British. They had a civil war that they lost hundreds and thousands of men and all of that. So every nation has its up and downs. We can't, if fate has brought you to this nation, you can't give up. You have to work. Even if you decide to live in another country, yeah, you can do that, to, whether to school, to raise a family, to work. But that can't be a reason to give up, because that society you find yourself went through the same torturous process that we have gone through or we are going through. And it was citizens, it was these people there who created that society. God didn't come down from heaven to create that society. So it's not enough to say, yeah, Nigeria is bad, we all agree. But to give up on Nigeria and then assume you want to take citizenship of another country and think that's the end of it all. No, it doesn't make sense. You can be there and still be interested in the politics and in the history and everything that concerns Nigeria, support efforts, local efforts to develop, this country. Because at the end of the day, and I tell people this, if we just have an oasis, so everywhere, all the countries in the world are bad, it's only the United States is good, it means everybody will rush there. The only way we can have a sane world will be to develop, to have as many countries every day, every year, more countries develop. Because then if that doesn't happen, everybody will rush to, ultimately that society will collapse. So we can't give up really on our country. There is nothing. It's important that as we continue to wade through this crisis, it's difficult surviving here, the challenges, people go to school, they come out, no job, no opportunities, nothing. But that's the struggle. Nationhood is not a tea party. I tell those who, if you read the struggles of every nation, look at what happened in France during the French Revolution. When the Queen, Marie Antoinette, she was guillotined and they took her head like this, dripping with blood, and people were praying for it. And suddenly, mayhem and chaos. Every society has had its own trouble, but every society that is standing today, that is well organized, is the product of the people who live in that society. So we can really create, let's continue to struggle. Ultimately, good will prevail over evil in this our country. We will have to decide how we want to do it. A lot of people don't know. Many 30, 35 years ago, we were young students in the universities. We fought the Babangida dictatorship. We fought Ugbajah dictatorship. We were imprisoned. Some of my colleagues died in the process. Some lost limbs, some lost their careers, lost family members, some were exiled, and so on. People put in efforts that we are here today and we have this opportunity to talk and have elections. And that's why I see some of the people in the National Assembly, people have no clue how people spend nights in this country, even as students, running from one campus to the other, producing leaflets, campaigning for democracy, campaigning against military rule, and so on. We have it today. It can only get better. People who have led this country to where it is now won't live here they won't be alive or around forever. Let's continue to raise the consciousness of our people that a new Nigeria is possible. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Onumah. We really appreciate, you coming on and sharing so much knowledge, and you have really just caused us to have a lot of food for thoughts. And I believe that it's something that we can all go back with, to see that there is, like, the fact that we are here today is an opportunity for us to get better and consciously be aware of the fact that we are the ones who can make the nation and Nigeria great. So I'm just going to ask for, I see that we don't have any questions in the chat box, but we have some comments. We have some comments here. Yes, so I see Toby Ransom said, being an incurable optimist, the principle of otherness, thinking of the next person and not just myself. I'm glad that we're having these, sort of take homes. Salamat says, sadly, it's a norm for Nigerians. It's worse when there is a vivid color difference. Okay, I believe that is in line with the example of the foreigner at the airport. And that even just shows that, we as Nigerians have the heart of compassion. Like, we actually have it in us to help other people, but we just have to see that we should be helping ourselves as well. Yes, so Olu Dolapo says, supporting local efforts to drive unity from the diaspora as opposed to instigating and perpetuating divisions from the diaspora. Absolutely, absolutely. And that was an interesting point as well, that regardless of where you are, you can also be contributing to the betterment of the nation. So thank you so much. I'm just going to ask for closing remarks, if there's any. Sorry, I think there's one question that just came in. Maimuna says, how can the media lead the campaign on integrity and patriotism from all? Dr. Onumah, would you like to, your media specialist?
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, it's also in line with the discussion that's been going on for almost an hour and a half now. The media has been at the heart of progressive politics in Nigeria, whether we're looking at the anti-colonial struggle, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and the likes, how they contributed to ensuring that Nigeria gained independence. And as media people, we have a role. The media or journalism is the only profession that is enshrined in the Constitution. They call them the fourth estate of the realm. They have a responsibility, the role to hold governments to account. The duty of the media. No other profession is mentioned in the Constitution of the Federal Republic. So that tells you how noble and important the role of journalists and media can be in deepening our democracy and ensuring probity and accountability. Of course, there are those who also tell you that the media has become endangered species. Every day, it's you hear cases of journalists being detained or prevented from doing their work, which has also been which has always been the lot of journalists in this country right from independence. A lot of journalists were detained. Some died. Delegiwa in 1986, October, received a letter bomb, and he was blown to smithereens. Until today, nobody knows anything about what happened or where that assassination came from. So, yes, I agree with you. The media has a role to play. The media is important in the scheme of things because apart from helping us to promote the whole idea of the need to know, the right to information. Information is power, they say. Media is also a platform to help fulfill the constitutional right of freedom of expression. So we can talk about the right to information, the freedom of expression, and so on. And luckily for us, we have a multiplicity of media voices, diversity of media, and now we also have what's it called, social media to add to the mix that, I mean, it comes with the territory, the challenges and so on, but we can look at the opportunity. A lot of the campaign against obnoxious laws in the country today have been promoted via social media, you know, whether it's even the anti-social media bill that was, or that it has been in the works for almost every new National Assembly that comes in wants to introduce a social media bill to guard Nigerians and constrict the civic space. So it's important. We have a robust media in the country. Of course, there are challenges. The media is also part of society. To some extent, the media has been corrupted, just like every facet of our society. And this point I was going to make earlier, that I think at the end of the day, my take on all of this is that as Nigerians, we haven't spoken enough about our country. We haven't spoken enough about the kind of society we want. Because as a family, people come together, maybe even before the children are born, to the husband and wife will decide that this is how we want to run this family. We want to have 3 or 4 children. We want to be able to send this to public school, private school. We want to do this. We haven't had enough conversation. And a nation is an organic thing. It's not just a nation, like it lives and breathes. People need to understand that. So if we understand that, we won't be treating our country with the level of the kind of levity that we treat it. Oh, Nigeria. No, a country comes into being and can go out of being. A country comes into being and can die. There have been so many countries that are no longer with us as we speak, that were there many years ago. There are new countries that are emerging. South Sudan being an example. So let's not take our country for granted. People say, oh, Nigeria is not negotiable. Nigeria is indivisible. That's not the attitude. That's not the psychology of nation building. You need to sit down and continue to have that conversation. How do we, as the Catholic bishop, was his name, St. Augustine, talks about when he defined a nation as a group of people with a common object of love. So we, as Nigerians, we need to ask ourselves, what is the common object of our love? People will say, if you ask Nigeria, say, oh, football brings us together, but that's certainly not it. What's the common object of our love? What is that thing that binds us? That if you see a Nigerian in North Pole, they look at themselves as Nigerian, not Igbo, Hausa, Ijaw, Kanuri, or something else. What is that common denominator that makes us? It doesn't have to be for every single people, but at least it has to be for the majority for us to continue to sustain, the country. So I think at the end of the day, beyond even the media, we all have a responsibility that this nation has to work. And the starting point for it working is for us to have that hard conversation about the kind of nation we want. I talk about, and I've written about this in many of my books, about how the British created Nigeria in its own image. Nigeria was essentially a mercantilist, the outcome of a mercantilist negotiation, and it continues to be that way. One of the mistakes, or maybe it wasn't a mistake really, was a grand design by the rulers at independence, was not to recreate Nigeria in the image of the new Nigeria. So both our educational system, so many things had to be recreated, that by now, and going back to the example I gave about my Ghanaian friend and what happened to him in Nigeria. So you see, a young man came to me many years ago, was having this conversation about nationhood. I say, perhaps there are a few creative things we need to do. And again, I go to the examples, and I'm grateful that I have the opportunity of living in different countries and around the world. I studied the Canadian society, where I've lived for about 25 years now. And I see that when Canada became a country in, 1867, one of the things that the Prime Minister or rulers of Canada did at independence was that we have this massive country that is 10 times the physical size of Nigeria. So if you want to fly from one end of Canada to the other, you fly anywhere between 7.5 hours. That's how big Canada is. The highest you can fly in Nigeria, maybe from Lagos to Maiduguri, maybe an hour, 10 minutes. From the farthest part of Canada, you can fly 7.5 hours. That's how massive this country is. If you put Nigeria in 10 places, which is like saying from Cameroon to Mauritania in West Africa, the whole of the West Africa sub-region, what did they do? They said the only way we can keep this country together is to connect the country. So they built rail lines. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues in Canada today, for example, because that effort was done on the back of Chinese indentured workers. They brought laborers from China to come and build this railway. So today, it's a different story, because a lot of those indentured workers or their children and grandchildren are asking for reparation or redemption or something. But they did what they had to do. that as big as this country is, you can, if you want to travel by road from, say, on the West Coast, Vancouver, on the West Coast, we borders Alaska, to Newfoundland by the Atlantic Ocean, you travel 7 days by road. But there are rail lines and there are roads connecting every piece of Canada. Today, people can't travel. There are Nigerians who were born in Lagos or born in, say, Oyo State. They are unable to travel to the next state. One of the things I did as a young NYC person, I traveled a lot during my student days because I was involved in the National Association of Nigerian Students. When I graduated, there were about 2 states in the old state structure then, about 30 years ago. Borno State and Sokoto State were the only 2 states I hadn't been to as a student. I was praying to serve in Borno State or Sokoto State. And I got Borno State and I was dancing and happy. A few of my classmates didn't understand why I was happy, but I had this intricate feeling of patriotism that I wanted to know every bit of this country, to say and beat my chest. I proudly went to serve in Borno State. The day I finished my NYSC, I took a vehicle from Borno State and traveled by road through Jigawa State, through Katsina State, Zamfara, and ultimately to Sokoto. And from Sokoto, I traveled back to Lagos. And I could say to myself, yes, I know Nigeria like the back of my hand. You can't do that now, not because you don't want to do it. The roads are not there. The security situation has deteriorated, the cost of traveling and so on. We have a situation today where something like the NYSC scheme that was designed to create national unity has been so bastardized. And so I was telling this, I was talking earlier of a story I told the young man. I said, perhaps we can, beyond the NYSC, we can think of something, for example, and say, young NYSC, people who graduate, if we have intercultural or interreligious or interethnic marriages, maybe there is an incentive by the government. And then if couples have kids, they can give them names, whether Christian or Muslim names, from different parts of the country, so that in a generation or 2, we have Nigerians that will bear Ibrahim Chima or Ngozi Abiodun. You won't know where they come from. You won't attack them because you know their name. If they write something in the newspaper or social media, you won't start attacking them because of their name. I have a son whose name is Dotun. I have a daughter whose name is Moyo, and so on. So you find out that culture, language, and all those things bring people together. We need to find that thing that will bring us together. Maybe it's developing one common language for the country so that everybody can speak and understand each other. So that the man from Maiduguri, when he comes to Abuja and doesn't speak English and speaks only Kanuri or Hausa, we don't look at him as a fool or as an ignorant and uneducated person because he doesn't understand the language. People in Isenyi or Osogbo who are supposed to go to the same school that those of the children of those of us in Abuja and Lagos, they are taking math classes and English classes in Yoruba, and they are expected to go to the same universities as people who, so there is a lot we need to unpack about Nigeria, and I'm happy that we are having this kind of conversation. It should happen more in schools as it used to happen those days when some of us were in school. I don't know how much of that happened, but my passing word would just be to thank this foundation for this fantastic work it is doing, and hope that it doesn't rest until at least we get a semblance of some positive light in all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Onumah. As always, you bring a lot of wholesomeness to the questions that are thrown at you. We appreciate you coming on this platform and speaking and sharing everything that you have so far. Unfortunately, we have some questions in the chat box, but unfortunately our time is fast spent, so we can't take them, but we will be sharing these questions with our speakers, and we will post on our social media their responses, so you can look out on there for that. Everyone who has dropped a question. So I'm going to ask one of my colleagues to just drop our social media handles as well as the handles of our speakers, so that everyone on here can connect with them after this meeting. Mr. Ugbajah, if you have any closing remarks as we round up, please.
Well, thank you. It's been a great session. One, you've succeeded in getting me to talk about the things I don't like talking about in the public, because I just felt there's it could be tiring talking about these things. So I decided to just focus on myself and my immediate sphere of influence. So I'll say two things. Number one, and it's personal to everyone who is listening or to everyone who is going to watch this. It's usually easy. Probably the easiest thing is to know what is wrong. So if you know what is wrong, you don't win any trophy. It's the most difficult thing. Well, in the middle of it is to know what is right. If you know what is right, well, maybe you've won maybe a small trophy. And right now we have so many people who know what is right, what should be done, we see people write books, articles, newspaper everywhere, social media, what should be done. But the most difficult part of it, where you get the trophy to do what is right. That's the most difficult part of it. So we have a critical mass of people who know what is wrong, what should be done, but the skill and integrity to do what is right is what our society clearly lacks. So if you're a young person, if you're an old person listening or watching this after, you ask yourself, where are you? Do you have the skill and the integrity to do what is right? Are you part of the problem? Are you part of the solution? If everybody follows your attitude, your lifestyle, would we have a better society, or would we have the kind of society we have today? So thank you for inviting me. It's been a good one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you again, Mr. Ugbajah and Dr. Onumah. You have really just, brought so much light to the title, to the topic. And we appreciate you at the foundation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. Thank you for giving us your time. And our hope is that you go out, tomorrow, even today, as you're on your way home, just make sure you share the same knowledge to everyone that you meet, be that solution provider and not a part of the problem to be solved. That's one of our creeds, our values at the foundation. So yes, thank you so much. In the chat box, we have put our social media handles so you can follow us, and thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.